The chandeliers sparkled above the crowded restaurant, forks clinking against fine china, laughter buzzing through the air. No one noticed the men at first, 5 shadows sliding in through the polished glass doors, their boots too heavy for the velvet carpet. Their eyes locked on one man at the center table. Raymond Holt, Billionaire CEO, dressed in a tailored navy suit, the weight of power resting easy on his shoulders. But Clara, the waitress, noticed. She always noticed. She had carried trays through chaos before, seen the cracks in people's smiles, and the moment those men fanned out around Holt's table, she knew trouble had arrived. The first fist hit the CEO's jaw before anyone could scream. Silverware scattered, wine splashed red across the white cloth like fresh blood. People shrieked, chairs toppled, and suddenly the rich and powerful who filled the room were nothing but terrified onlookers. Raymond's guards barely had time to stand before the attackers pulled steel rods from their jackets. 5 against 2, it wasn't a fight, it was an execution. Clara froze for half a heartbeat, her tray trembling in her hands. She had promised herself she'd never step back into that world, never reveal what she'd been trained to do before life pushed her into aprons and night shifts. But watching the rods crash against Raymond's ribs, hearing his strangled groan, she felt something inside her ignite. She dropped the tray. Plates shattered, but no one heard over the chaos. Clara's breath steadied, her stance shifting. For the first time in years, her eyes sharpened not like a waitress, but like a weapon long kept hidden, and when the closest man turned toward her, sneering at the skinny girl in an apron, he didn't see what everyone else would see a moment later, that she wasn't afraid. She was ready. The man swung the steel rod, aiming for Clara's head, as if she were nothing but another helpless witness. But Clara's body moved before thought, years of muscle memory snapping back like a whip. She ducked, grabbed his wrist, and with a sharp twist, the rod clattered to the floor. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Nobody had expected the quiet waitress, the one who smiled softly while pouring coffee, to move like lightning. Clara kicked the man's knee, sending him crashing down. The second attacker lunged, but she pivoted, her apron fluttering as she slammed an elbow into his throat. He collapsed, choking, eyes wide with disbelief. Raymond, half-dazed from the earlier blows, looked up through the chaos. His vision blurred, but what he saw made his breath catch. Clara, his waitress, the woman who had taken his order without meeting his eyes, was dismantling trained men like they were amateurs. The third man charged, bigger than the others, rage twisting his face. Clara snatched a broken wine bottle from a table, her grip precise, her stance unshakable. She didn't stab. She struck his hand with surgical accuracy, forcing him to drop his weapon. Then, with a fluid motion, she flipped him over a chair, the crash echoing through the stunned restaurant. By now, the room had fallen silent. No screams, no panicked rush for the exit. Just every set of eyes fixed on the slender woman in black and white, her chest rising steadily, her gaze sharp as steel. The fourth man hesitated, doubt flickering. Clara didn't give him the chance to act. She closed the distance, disarmed him with a swift strike, and slammed his face against the marble bar counter. Only one remained. He backed up, eyes darting to the exits, suddenly realizing the tide had turned. Clara stepped forward, each sound of her shoes on the marble echoing like a warning. "Pick him up," she ordered coldly, pointing at Raymond with the bottle still in her hand. "You came for him, didn't you? Then carry your message back yourself." The man's courage broke. He stumbled toward the door, dragging his fallen comrade with him, leaving behind wreckage and the echo of a truth no one in the room could deny. Clara wasn't just a waitress, and Raymond Holt, clutching his bruised ribs, knew at that moment His life had just changed. Raymond sat slumped in the velvet chair, his guards scrambling back to him, but their faces were pale, ashamed. They hadn't saved him. She had. Clara bent down, picked up a linen napkin, and calmly wiped the blood from her hands as if she were merely cleaning a spill. Her chest rose and fell with controlled breaths, the kind that came from long training, not panic. The restaurant manager rushed toward her, stammering, "Miss, what on earth?" But Clara ignored him. She turned to Raymond, her voice soft yet unshaken. "You should get those ribs checked. 2 might be fractured." His eyes narrowed. "How do you know that?" For a moment, the mask she wore, the humble waitress, the quiet girl serving tables, slipped. Clara's gaze hardened, distant, almost haunted. "Because I've seen worse. Because I've caused worse." The room fell even quieter, though the attackers were long gone. People whispered, phones buzzed with the urgency of what they had just witnessed, but Raymond only saw her. "You're not just a waitress," he said slowly. Her lips curled in a faint, bitter smile. "I was never meant to be." He leaned forward, despite the pain, curiosity burning through his composure. "Then who are you?" Clara froze. For a second, the weight of her past pressed heavy on her shoulders. The years of training, the missions no one could ever know about, the vow she made to disappear and live an ordinary life. But fate had dragged her out of the shadows tonight, and Raymond Holt, billionaire CEO with more enemies than friends, was staring at her like she was the answer to a question he hadn't dared to ask. "I'm no one," she whispered. Then she turned to walk away. Yet as she pushed open the kitchen door, Raymond called after her, his voice rough but steady. "Then why do I feel like I owe you my life?" Clara didn't answer, but the smallest hesitation in her step betrayed something she hadn't felt in years: connection. The next morning, the city woke buzzing with whispers about the billionaire who was nearly killed at his own dinner table, and the mysterious waitress who stopped it. Some called her a bodyguard in disguise, others swore she was ex-military. None of them knew her name. Raymond did. He tracked her down, not through the restaurant, but through the silence she left behind. A resignation slip, no forwarding address. She was trying to vanish again, but Raymond Holt wasn't a man who let loose ends slip away. He found her outside a small train station at dawn, a single bag slung over her shoulder. Clara stiffened when she saw him step out of the black car, his suit neat despite the bruises along his jaw. "You shouldn't be here," she said flatly. He didn't argue. He didn't posture. He simply walked toward her, slow, measured, until he was close enough that she could see the sincerity in his eyes. "I came to thank you and to offer you something." She shook her head. "I don't take payment for mistakes." "I should have stayed hidden." "This isn't payment," Raymond said, his voice softer now. "This is an invitation. Work for me. Protect me. Not as a waitress. Not as no one. But as yourself, whoever you really are." Clara's chest tightened. The life he was offering would drag her back into the world she had fought to escape. Yet, in the brief silence between them, she saw something else too. Not just a billionaire needing a bodyguard, but a man who had spent too many nights alone, who understood what it meant to be haunted by choices. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because last night," Raymond said, his eyes unwavering, "you didn't hesitate. You saved me when no one else moved." "And because—" He hesitated, then allowed the smallest truth to escape. "Because I trust you already, in a way I don't trust anyone else." The train whistle wailed, calling her to the escape she'd planned. But Clara didn't move. Slowly she lowered her bag. Her voice was quiet, steady. "If I do this, my past comes with me." "All of it," Raymond gave a single nod. "Then we face it together." The wind cut through the station, but for the first time in years, Clara felt warmth rise in her chest. Not safety, not certainty, something rarer. Hope, And as she stepped into the car beside him, she knew her life was no longer hers alone. It was a story being rewritten, one she hadn't dared to dream of.